leather boots on courtroom floors, 26 years behind closed doors, files marked confidential, truth suppressed, but I ride with justice on my chest. From crime scene to courtroom, I've seen it all. I see my priest and wait for the judge's gavel to fall. Every child matters, no case too small. I feel their pain and hear their frightened call. A voice for the voiceless, I won't let go. I speak the truth, they need to know. This is crime courtroom confidential. Silence breaks and hearts are hurt. We fight for the ones the system never saw. Every story, every word, no secrets buried, no pain ignored. Justice rights in bold and raw. This is truth, unfiltered, and I'm not backing off. My hair prayer hangs beneath the sky. Courtroom robe and a watchful eye. Tattoos tell stories, scars that stay. I've lived alone in every way. From crime scene to courtroom, I've seen it all. I say my piece and wait for the judge's gavel to fall. Every child matters, no case too small. I feel their pain and their frightened call. A voice for the voiceless, I won't let go. I speak the truth, they need to know. This is crime courtroom confidential, where silence breaks and hearts are hurt. We fight for the ones the system never saw. Every story, every word, no secrets buried, no pain ignored. Justice rights in bold and raw. This is truth, unfiltered, and I'm not backing off. Pansy by my side, honey in the field. I carry the weight that others conceal. Behind the bench, behind the fear, I've held the line year after year. Not just facts, but human lives. We investigate and dig where darkness resides. Every case, a sacred vow to find the truth, starting now. This is crime courtroom confidential. Silence breaks and hearts are hurt. From crime scene to courtroom, we stand tall. Every time let's go, stay true, never gain, leave you stand. Your leverage no and found. Every story unfiltered, and I'm not backing off. A voice for the voiceless, truth on the line. We seek justice and keep evil confined. This is true, unfiltered, and I'm not backing off.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Crime Courtroom Confidential. I'm Bev, your host, a Crown prosecutor with 26 years as a solicitor advocate in the United Kingdom. Today I'd like to talk about the case of Perrin Barlow. A beautiful little boy, 9 months old, who lost his life in the worst of ways. But before we get into that, first of all, let me apologise for the fact that I'm not on camera today. I've had a medical procedure to do a bit of revision on scar tissue on my nose following a dog bite. So do bear with me. If I can ask you before we get into the case to please like the video, share it. If you're not subscribed already, please do so and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the content that's coming up. It would really, really help me, and what would help me even more is some engagement. So none of this costs you anything other than a few clicks. But if you can let me know where you're listening from, what you think of the content, or any suggestions for cases that you'd like me to cover, then that's going to help us get into the algorithm and get these cases that are little known into the limelight, and voices be given to these children who just simply don't have a voice of their own. So let's talk about Perrin. This comes back to my series on the history of child protection in the UK, and we're now in 2002 in our journey through the years. And when I talk about Perrin losing his life in the worst of ways, you might expect me to describe some huge violent incident, but that isn't the worst way to live or die. The worst way, especially for a child or a baby, is neglect. Neglect devastates a child's brain and emotional development. Abuse at least registers as attention for a child's brain, and so it continues to develop, albeit not always in the most positive of ways. But neglect, the silence, no response, no caregiver, no chance to grow, is utterly devastating for a child's brain development. And for Perrin, there was no chance at all. So what's the background to this case? So his mother, Stephanie Horrocks, was born in 1986, and she was adopted at the age of 5 and raised in Runcorn by her adoptive mother, Mary. So Runcorn isn't too far away from me. It's in the north-west of England. And what we know is that early trauma leaves scars. And without proper support, those scars can shape a life. Mary, Stephanie's adoptive mother, remembered her daughter as angelic, a girl who loved reading and dancing. But by her teens, Stephanie had turned to drugs, later to sex work and to chaotic living. All a response to the early trauma in her life. In 1996, she was convicted after her child overdosed on methadone. That wasn't Perrin. By 2000, she had left for Cornwall, severing all ties with her family. And who did she meet? She met Perrin's father, Perrin Barlow, in Runcorn, and then moved with him. But tragedy struck. Peter died in a road traffic accident around the time that Perrin was born, so that was in late 2001. And Stephanie was left in a strange place, alone, addicted and vulnerable. She had 2 older daughters already taken into care after years of hunger and neglect. And neighbours in that matter recalled them begging for food, scavenging bins, hammering on windows when locked inside, and the pattern was clear. Stephanie prioritised drugs, alcohol, and men over her children. But what happened with Perrin? Perrin was born prematurely, suffering from drug withdrawal. From birth and throughout his short life, he was subject to child protection measures, including an interim supervision order. So that's something that comes before a child is taken into care. It's slightly less onerous, and it allows a child to remain in the family, but subject to the supervision of authorities, or so the idea goes. Neighbours described him as looking like a bag of bones, looking like a lifeless doll in his pram, and reports flooded social services, but very little changed. In January of 2002, Perrin developed a chest infection, and doctors urged Stephanie to take him to the hospital. She refused, saying that she had other things to do, and so his health deteriorated. Now, Stephanie at that time was living with a new boyfriend, Mark McAndrew, and he was equally neglectful. They were focused on each other, not on Perrin. Finally, in March of 2002, Perrin was admitted to hospital and he was treated until April. And a detailed child protection plan followed. So that's a plan that's put into place with clear goals for the parents, for social services, to try and resolve the problems that the parents and the family are facing. But they're only as useful as the effort that the people involved put into them. And back in Camperdown Street, where they lived, the neglect simply resumed as it did before. And that meant that on the 16th of July 2002, the worst thing happened, and Perrin was found dead. He was 9 months old. He was malnourished, dehydrated. His pneumonia had been left untreated, and his short life had been nothing but pain and misery. So what happened when these two faced the courtroom? In 2004, Stephanie Horrocks and Mark Andrews stood in the dock, not for murder, but for child cruelty. That child cruelty lasting between the 14th and the 16th of July 2002. Both pleaded guilty to that. Stephanie was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment and Mark to 15 months imprisonment. Now bear in mind, in the UK, you only serve somewhere between half and 2/3 of your sentence. That's not very much time behind bars to pay for the misery and pain that Perrin suffered. Days later, Stephanie herself died in prison, another casualty of her addiction. The courtroom had heard not of sudden violence, but of prolonged neglect. A baby ignored, warning signs dismissed, and systems overwhelmed. We know that in the UK, the child protection system is so overwhelmed with the number of cases and children who require their support and help that it's little wonder that things are missed. The resources are just simply not there, and that needs to change. In 2005, there was an inquest. Coroner Nigel Meadows convened the inquest, but he sought a jury inquest, arguing that under Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the jury should consider whether the system neglect by social services contributed to Perrin's death. The High Court initially refused that application. Mr. Justice Wilson ruled that social workers could not have suspected a real and immediate risk to Perrin's life. So there was a normal inquest. And at that inquest, evidence revealed that Perrin had shown symptoms for at least 24 hours before his death. I would say probably significantly longer, given that he'd already been to the hospital in March. Experts testify he probably would have survived if he was taken to hospital within the final 12 hours. That's how close a sliding door moment is. If a social worker had seen him in that last 24 or 12 hours, then Perrin may very well have remained with us. Paramedic Nigel Turner recalled arriving to find Perrin already cold, blue and pulseless. Coroner Meadows praised health professionals for acting in good faith, but he did identify serious shortcomings. Signs of heroin withdrawal in Perrin during earlier hospital visits was not passed to social services. Now, members of the National Health Service are mandated reporters, and they ought to have made a complaint or referral at that time. Police also failed to share information about Stephanie's heroin abuse. And the conclusion of the inquest was that Perrin had died of natural causes contributed to by parental neglect. Responsibility lay with his parents, who ignored his suffering and failed to seek medical help. So what lessons have been learnt, and what is the legacy left by Perrin Barlow? After the inquest verdict, the Plymouth Safeguarding Children Board admitted the case had exposed systemic weakness. A spokesperson said, "These days, social workers, health visitors, and those in the caring professions can be damned if they do, and damned if they don't. If they act preemptively and something goes wrong, they face vilification. If they don't act and tragedy strikes, they suffer the same fate." So that's looking at when parents are removed because there are clear levels of risk in the family. Often social services are looked at as being too intrusive, too draconian. But if they do nothing and those risks exist, then obviously the results can be as tragic as this particular death was. He insisted that lessons had been learned locally and nationally with improved training and safeguarding systems. Meanwhile, CAFCAS, which is the body which provides an independent children's guardian to any child who is part of a family court process, so that's someone who just acts in their best interest, launched an inquiry into its backlog of 2,000 cases awaiting the appointment of a children's guardian. That's 2,000 children in the court system still waiting for somebody to represent their interests. Perrin's death was part of that review, highlighting how delays had left vulnerable children without independent representation in court. And then there is the mother's death. 2 days into her prison sentence, Stephanie Horrocks collapsed. Tests revealed heroin, methadone, cocaine and tranquilizers in her system. And 3 days after that, she suffered a fatal brain hemorrhage in her cell. She was rushed to Frenchay Hospital in Bristol, but pronounced dead on arrival. Coroner Meadows ruled her death was from natural causes, not directly linked to drug abuse. Stephanie's life ended as chaotically as it had been lived. Another casualty of addiction, leaving behind unanswered questions and a trail of devastation. Perrin Barlow's life ended not in violence and chaos, but in silence. Neglect killed him as surely as any weapon might. His case joins the tragic roll call of Victoria Climbié, Baby P and others. Children failed by those closest to them and by the systems that are meant to protect them. The inquest into Perrin's death did not deliver the sweeping systemic reckoning that some had hoped for, but it did lay bare the fragility of child protection systems, the dangers of missed communication, and the unbearable cost of neglect. Perrin was a baby boy who never had a chance. In the court of law, the verdict was parental neglect. Justice was not all it ought to be. In the court of conscience, the charge is collective failure. Perrin's case reminds us of this. When a child is born into chaos, the margin for error is razor thin, and when the system falters, the consequences are irreversible. So we will continue to speak the unfiltered truth. Be a voice for the voiceless and seek justice for those who cannot seek it themselves. That's all for this episode, and I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about Perrin's case and found it interesting. I know that it's not an enjoyable topic, but I hope that it's given you a bit of extra information about things that maybe you didn't have before. If I can remind you all, please do me one favour, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share the video and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about how Perrin's mother and her boyfriend were punished for his tragic demise. Let me know about any other cases that you would like me to cover, or just leave me an emoji if that's all you want to do, but engage so that we get into the algorithm. And it just leaves me to say, please look after yourselves and look after each other, and I'll see you next time.